So I would love to extend an official warm welcome to our business webinar program presented by Bank of America. Today's session is Leading Through Challenging Times, and we will learn how to build a resilient and inclusive company culture, as well as strategies for responding to world and market events, as well as things happening internally at your company. I'm Desiree Brown. I'm Senior Manager of Digital Education and Content here at the Tory Burch Foundation. And I am so excited to be here with Chelsea C. Williams. Chelsea is returning to our series. She is a workplace educator and mentor to the next generation workforce. She is also the founder and CEO of ReImagine Talent Co. And my favorite, Chelsea is a 2022 Tory Burch Fellow. And so after her presentation, we will have plenty of time for Q&A. So be sure to ask your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. And just as a reminder, everyone, please take notes. And today's session will be recorded, so watch your inbox for the replay link. And with that, Chelsea, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Desiree, thank you so much for the warm introduction, and to the Tory Burch community. I am thrilled to be able to bring this conversation on leading through change to our membership at large. I want to thank the Tory Burch Foundation for the opportunity to support you all today. Some of you may have joined last year's session where we talked all about people and culture, and today we are drilling in on the conversation of leadership. And that is something that is so vital for founders and CEOs to take time to reflect on, so that you are being authentic and that you are promoting vision to your team and ultimately to your customers and clients at large. So get comfortable. This will be an engaging session. I can already feel the energy in the chat. Love it. I hope that you will continue that as we get into the content. We will finish with at least 10 to 15 minutes for you all to ask questions. So again, use the Q&A as you start to think about things that you would like for us to dissect together. So let's go ahead and get into it. I want to just start by saying that this is for the Tory Burch community only. And so please do not, share these slides or this recording beyond our community. It will be on YouTube and you can use that. But this is our intellectual property, so I do like to state that at the beginning of the session. A little bit about our work at ReImagine Talent. We are a talent development firm. We work at the intersection of workforce and talent development, and that basically means that we are supporting organizations with their people strategy, focused on making sure we can increase engagement, development, and retention efforts, because we know that strong teams is what gets us to business performance. And we also have a practice that focuses on supporting the next generation workforce, known today as Gen Z. And so I will bring into this conversation a multi-generational lens and conversation on leadership and how we combat navigating change in this current environment. So what are we going to do in our time together? We're going to talk a little bit about the current state of work. Where are we? Because where we are will help to inform why we're having this conversation. We will then talk about leadership. That's right. We don't talk enough about it as founders and CEOs. Now, we've certainly demonstrated leadership to step into this terrain that is known as entrepreneurship. But the truth is, as we grow, as we scale, how we lead becomes vital in making sure that we are supporting the team that gets us to impact in the marketplace. We'll end the session by talking about 4 practical steps you can take to lead your team through challenging times. There's 2 core messages I want to start us with. Number 1, the only thing constant these days is change. So we can either embrace it or be ruled by it. Which one will you choose? Second, culture is what an organization does. Sometimes we make concepts very challenging. We're like, culture, people, leadership. It can be ambiguous or theoretical. I want to bring us down to the practical foundation today. And it means that when we're talking about culture and we're talking about what's necessary to lead our organizations in this current time, we have to understand that what we do or don't do will point to what our culture is. So leaders, I want to encourage you to embrace change and lean into the opportunity that we are currently faced with. Let's talk a little bit about the current state of work. Founders and CEOs are navigating through a changing work landscape. So many realities are impacting the way that we are serving our clients and customers, managing and leading our teams, and how we're considering our personal lives, because that is such an important part of ultimately our role as founders and CEOs. I wanted to take a moment and shed the light on the state of the workforce and workplace today, because I believe that when we are clear of what is taking place around us, we're better able to perform in the marketplace. So bear with me a moment while I talk through some of the headlines that are shaping our environment. First, when we consider today's workforce, this is the talent that's available to us. It's a changing landscape. At the candidate market, many times we are hearing and seeing that folks are making demands on jobs and roles, right? From salary to working dynamics and conditions. The workforce is getting younger. Although we have 5 generations in the workforce today, we are seeing a shift towards younger generations. Boomers are retiring. We're seeing values and ideal shifts. Skills-based hiring, AI evolution, that's for another session. Globalization, offshoring, a gig economy that is growing. This is a short list of what's impacting our ability to get to talent. We must understand these realities as we consider leading through change. But we can't just stop at what's happening externally. Let's take a little parlay into the world of workplaces today. What's happening? Well, certainly we are being challenged to do more with less. We are being cost conscious across the board as we are navigating through economic turmoil. Work dynamics are changing. Purpose and vision alignment is being elevated in organizations. Culture and well-being are spotlighted as we navigate through burnout caused by the past couple years of the economic recession and COVID-19, which we are obviously still seeing the impact of. Finally, state of diversity, equity, and inclusion, question mark. Again, that's another session, but we must understand as we have the conversation on leading our teams through challenging times, this conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion is a part of that. Because organizations today, small businesses, solopreneurs, large enterprises are either deprioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, reprioritizing, going with the wind, or amplifying and saying, we will not back down. And I want to say, as we navigate through the challenging times of today, diversity, equity, and inclusion must be at the forethought of how we engage our teams and how we engage in the marketplace. Today, we need intentional leadership. That's why we are having this conversation. If you take a look at the headlines, the conversation around leadership is just increasing left and right. How we engage talent, how we manage through challenging times, what's necessary to prepare for evolution. And so I'm thrilled that the Tory Burch Foundation would hold space for us to address this conversation together. Change, crisis, evolution, all around us. Here's a short snippet of all of the different elements of change, crisis, and evolution that we might be navigating, some at the intersection. From human rights and social justice, to environmental changes, to political and geopolitical public health crisis, and then industry shifts and change. Overarching theme across all of these, personal life changes impacting individuals and their families, their loved ones. Which one of these are impacting your organization today? Depending on our company or our industry and sector, some of these elements might be elevated more than others, right? But I want you to understand when we're having this conversation about leading through challenging times, it's likely that all or many of these elements that I've highlighted on the slide, we as leaders must consider. So in this space, as we go through this presentation, we will unpack opportunities for you to thoughtfully, intentionally, and mission aligned to your organization, communicate in a way that is impactful to your people. Many of you have likely heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm remembering my first psychology class when I was a high school student where this came into conversation. And it's so interesting because I do think when we consider times of challenge or crises, this concept of our needs as individuals becomes elevated. And so there was a time where we were not having conversations around needs in the workplace. The need was that you do your work. Over the past few years, we have seen this conversation of workplaces as places to support well-being and create spaces for inclusion and equity to thrive, requires that we consider the needs of our people. And through challenging time, these needs sometimes end up in our one-on-one conversations. They may end up in an email. It might end up on a social media thread. And so I want to just center us that this conversation around challenging times, we've been having challenging times for decades. You could point to so many different situations that we've had to navigate through, certainly across this country or globally. The difference today is there's often a demand or expectation that organizations, teams, and leaders are being mindful and responsive to what's happening around us. And this is something that is only going to become more important as we navigate through generational value shifts. Today's multi-generational and employees and job seekers are desiring many things, but research from Deloitte and McKinsey has really narrowed down what job seekers and employees desire into 4 buckets: values alignment, purposeful work, belonging, that's a new addition, and then vision. Where are we going? When we think about this concept of managing and leading through challenging times, I put a spot on vision because it becomes so important that we are clear as leaders of where we are going despite the bumps that are happening along the pathway to keep the people who are on our team engaged, aware, and committed. So as we go through this presentation, there will be other moments for us to dive into these 4 themes, but I want you to take some time after this session to consider, where are values, purpose, belonging, and vision showing up for your current team? Is it clear? If you ask them today about these elements, would they be able to say this is showing up even though it's really challenging for our industry, or even though we've had to make some hard decisions and cut some parts of our team? You'll want to make sure you do this work so that you're understanding the climate and the perspectives of the people who you manage and lead. I believe more than ever today, leadership is happening starting with us as founders and CEOs. And I can speak from this because I am one as well. Managing a fully remote team of 12, a mixture of full-time contractor, et cetera. And I have been challenged over the past 12 months to really get clear about leadership, my leadership. And when I think about leading through change, I love this graphic by the Center of Creative Leadership that really grounds us in what we can do to make sure that through times of challenge and change, we are vision clear with our people. And so I would ask you in this moment to consider, what's the direction that you've set for your organization? Is there agreement across your organization? Where does alignment take place? What does it look like for you to communicate, increase communication streams, create cross-collaboration opportunities, and make sure that teams are talking and connecting through the challenges and changes so that you are aligned on that vision that you've set forth? And then finally, we must have commitment. We must make sure that, again, at the face of change, maybe we have to reconsider KPIs or OKRs or goals, but that the people who are on our team, despite the bumpy, rocky times, want to be a part of what we are striving for and understand what's going to be necessary for us all to come together in synergy to produce performance and impact in the marketplace. That's the question. So you might sit and consider some questions like this. Direction, where's your organization going and what mindset, skill set, and capabilities will help your team get there? Alignment, where does collaboration and ideation happen on your team? What streams are being used for people to be able to work together? And then finally, commitment. In what ways are your team members accountable for their impact? Because when we navigate through this multi-generational environment, it becomes important for us to take the time to consider these 3 pillars and where we may have to flex our style depending on the individual who we are supporting on our team. And this is the part that makes leadership difficult. So I have a multi-generational team, couple boomers, several millennials, couple Gen Zers. Better believe that I am often challenged with the concept of flexing. So I'm clear of the direction, the alignment, and the commitment, but how it shows up may look different depending on who I'm communicating with. And so you've got to consider that as you engage your teams. Let's talk a little bit about culture, because culture is the catalyst for growth in our organizations. I'd like for you, please, to scan the QR code and answer the following question. This is the engaging part. What words would your team use to describe your organizational culture today? I'd like for you to put some words in that come to mind. If you were going to ask your team about your culture, what might they say? Please scan the QR code and then respond accordingly. I always love when I can see the typing. That means it's working well. So I love that. Okay. Words that you're saying. Open-minded. That is fantastic. Inclusive, cohesive, ever transitional, right? Evolving. I might say adaptable, right? That's fabulous. Empowering, collaborative. Someone said toxic. I love the fact that you're honest because we cannot confront what we're not transparent about. Joyful, mindful, creative. Absolutely love this, folks. Diverse and intentional. So good. Now you've shared some of the words your team may use to describe your organization today. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to validate this. So over the next couple weeks, I want you to get intentional about asking the question. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But you want to know what is the environment that you were creating, because your ability to lead and support through challenging times, in the best case scenario, you're leaning into your culture to help do that in a strong way. Or if you're saying that there's parts of your culture, somebody put it here, that are toxic, how do we address that so that we're building the most important muscle we need to build, trust? Okay, so thank you everybody for your participation in this. Here's what culture means. Organizational culture is the sum of the values, beliefs, practices, and behaviors that contribute to the social and psychological environment of an organization. So I bolded for you what I want you to take away, because I know it was a theoretical description, right? Values, what do we believe? Beliefs, what do we hold true? Mindset. Practices, what do we do? And behaviors, how do we act? So when we're talking about culture, those 4 pillars is what we should be using to get crystal clear about what makes our organization different from others. As I mentioned before, culture is what an organization does. So I want you to think about how things are done at your organization today. How are decisions made? How are folks rewarded, recognized? What's the culture of behaving amongst ourselves, with clients, with partners? How do we celebrate our wins and successes? Do we celebrate our wins and successes? Do we celebrate the wins and successes of our clients and customers? And then how do we communicate? And this is really important. And as one example, I want you to think about your organization today. When it comes to communication, human rights, social events, impact to a team member that the organization needs to know. Are you an organization that is reactive or proactive to communication? Consider that in this moment. Be honest. Do you have a guidance plan for internal and external communication? Now, I know there are Tory Burch agencies and firms that are stellar in communications on the line. Drop it in the chat if that's you. I am not a communications agency or firm. I know many that are fantastic, so I will stay in my lane today. But what I will say is you want to consider, if you've got 1 employee, 5 employees, 100 employees, 200 employees, what is your plan to communicate? We're going to dive into that shortly in terms of crises or human rights, social justice events. But I want you to consider not just those, but how are you communicating if there's impact to a team member? A leader. Those are things we need to have set in stone and clear, because it's likely that when it comes down to it and we need it, we have to flex, but at least we're not at square one. We have something that we can refer to as our guide, typically aligned to our mission and our culture. I want you all to share in the chat. Here's some questions I have for us. What type of culture have you built? So when you think about the culture today, and I've defined it now, I asked you what you thought your team would say about your culture. What type of culture do you believe you have built today? I want you to go into the chat and share. I'm going to give you 20 seconds to respond. The type of culture that you have built. They're coming in hot. They're coming in hot. They're coming in hot. Desiree, can you share a few things that you were seeing in the chat, please?
Sure. I am seeing diverse, holistic, safe, supportive, collaborative, empowering, celebratory, all kinds of great things.
All kinds of great things. Well, here's what I love. If you're saying that I've built a collaborative, empowering culture, how are you leaning on that culture essence to support how you are leading through change? So if I'm saying that we're collaborative, we work together, we promote synergy, we support each other, how does that show up in times of change and crises? If I'm saying we have an empowering culture where we put people in the driver's seat, how does that show up when crisis or change is at our front steps, front door? That's what I want you to consider, because it's much easier for you to lean into your culture, the authentic piece of your culture, and to build and evolve off of what is your truth today. Example, because folks like examples. If I said that we have a culture of honesty, if someone said, my culture, we're honest, we're truth tellers, that might mean that we are an organization that leans into feedback. We have determined that feedback is a gift. We have determined that feedback helps us grow as individuals, as teams, and as an organization. And so we have a feedback culture. It doesn't just happen top to bottom, it happens bottom to top. And we have a fluid organization where feedback can be offered at any point, in any time, in any way, as long as, of course, it's respectful, right? So I would say that becomes important when we're leading through change. We might have to go back and look and say, honesty is one of our cultural pillars. So even though I'm not feeling comfortable about what is going on externally, our culture is that we are honest. So we're going to make sure respect is the foundation, and we're going to create a space where people can share how they feel. That might mean that my response didn't hit the mark for my team, and they share that feedback. And instead of getting in my feelings, getting upset, I say, well, honesty is our culture. And so I have to hear this out. I have to listen to this, and I have to determine and warrant if additional support or communication is necessary. This is how you drill in on the cultural essence that you have communicated. Next question for you folks. What leadership qualities will be essential for the culture you've built to thrive? So if you've said, I've got an empowering culture or a connecting culture or an honest culture, how must you show up as a leader for that to thrive? Please go into the chat and share your responses. 20 seconds to respond. Desiree, what are we seeing, please?
We are seeing no sugarcoating, considerate, listen with an open mind, treat everyone with respect, giving grace to others when some mistakes are made. Love that one.
Yes, me too.
Integrity, humility, listening, vulnerable, honest, and empowering.
Yes. See, this is where the hard work happens, folks, because it's one thing for us to say this is how our culture is. And there's one thing for us to vet that with our team and them confirm, affirm, or disagree with what we have said to be the case. But the next steps become, as a leader, who do I have to be for this culture to thrive and for me to be able to lead at a time where I feel incredibly uncomfortable? And sometimes not even, I don't even feel as though I have the capabilities and skill sets to support what's at stake. And I think about my own journey over the past 12 months with human rights, social justice issues, and economy, the impact of the economy on our clients and customers, personal changes on my team, personal changes in my life. And the mirror gets put on us as leaders of how we show up at the face of all the things, as I like to say, that are impacting our organizations and those we are supporting. Here's what I want to do to take it a step further. I mentioned to you before as an example, honesty. Honesty as a cultural pillar that you might be saying is found present in your organization. And so when we talk about how does honesty show up in the leadership quality that's necessary for honesty to thrive despite challenging times, I thought about this concept of leaders turning on the light. Turn the light on. So that might mean that I am more open and honest about where we are. I might be more open and honest about where I am, sharing personal experiences that are impacting me, vulnerability. I may get into the point when we're having our team meetings, no matter what cadence it is, that instead of acting as though everything is all good, I share pieces of information. Now, there must be wisdom about how that's shared because you want to keep your people visionary and hopeful about what's to come. But I might say, team, I thought we were going to land that contract, but it didn't happen. So here's what this means. Here's what we're going to do to move forward. That is modeling behavior that we then want to see present in our teams. And I'm sharing that as an example of something I've had to do this year. But the concept of making our culture come alive and we turn on the light, switch light, as the leaders becomes vital in building trust. Now we get to get into the good part. I'm going to give you some practical steps that you can take to lead through change, to lead through challenging times, whatever vantage point you want to consider today. Now, here is my final chat for today for you. What challenges have impacted your team this year? So I painted a picture earlier about the things I've heard and seen and we've experienced from our partners at ReImagine. I now want to hear from you. Where appropriate, go into the chat and share. What are the challenges that you're being directed to respond to in our environment at large? I'm going to give you 20 seconds to respond, and then we will reflect. Desiree, could you share a couple of responses from those who were willing to share aloud?
Yes, of course. Toxic staff members,
Mm-hmm.
feeling overwhelmed or feeling like not being valued. The world around us is difficult to understand and navigate. Absolutely. Frequent changes in the team, exclusion, layoffs, financial decline. Remote teams can mean that there is confusion in the process. People not taking ownership, burnout, motivation, adapting to change. Lots
So many
to face.
There's so many. And folks, what I want to do in this moment and is, if this is one of the things we do today, validate that you're not alone. And that's why it's so important that we show up for these webinars, because we are reminded that we are not in some of this alone. Everything that was just mentioned, most of them, is 80% we experienced at my organization as well. And so what I heard said was challenges were both internal team challenges and external challenges. Now, some of the reality we can't control initially or at all, but that's where our response, thoughtful yet direct and quick, becomes important again in how we build trust and the kind of culture we continue to maintain across our organization. So thank you very much for sharing. So the 4 actions that I'm going to be covering with us today that I believe can be very helpful as you think about leading through change in challenging times are the following. For one, you want to take some time to determine your response manner and your method. So if we're talking about social, environmental, crises that are taking place, for lack of a better term, you'll want to sit down as a founder and CEO and you'll want to consider for your organization, what's your response going to be? And it might be individual. It might depend on the situation at hand, but I certainly, and I'll talk about this, would start to ask you to consider that before you need it and to leverage the resources you have to make sure you're being authentic through that process. And remember, response varies. It could be social, it could be organizational, industry changes, it could be team, toxic staff members, it could be the individual, a personal matter that's impacting how someone shows up day in and day out. You'll want to infuse trust into your organizational DNA by being who you say that you are and by holding folks accountable to that. You'll want to increase communication channels. Now, communication is always on the list of things we can do better. I think we know that. But when there are a lot of different things happening at once, the extra phone call, the text check-in, the email affirmation goes a long way. So we want to lean into it more than ever before. And then finally, people, again, vision, big point. Job seekers, employees want to see, want to know. So the more that we can reward, recognize, and amplify, the better we're able, again, to support and encourage those who are a part of our team. The reoccurring theme I want us to consider across these 4 points, folks, is that we are leading through a multi-generational workforce, as mentioned before. So with everything I shared today, you'll want to put that hat on and understand you may have to flex depending on the individual who we are talking about. It is not always one size fits all. So take what is applicable to you here and consider the diversity, for lack of a better term, of your team. Let's hop into number 1. I want you to determine your response manner and methods. How do you respond to global realities? What will your organization respond to? This should be connected to your vision, your mission, your values, your culture. I cannot tell you how to respond. I can encourage you that you be authentic and that you be consistent and that you leverage resources like communication agencies that can help you craft. But at the end of the day, this is something that we as founders and CEOs have to own. You then will want to determine what resources will you point your team to when in need, right? It could be benefits that you offer. It could be shared space that you're holding. All of those are important as we think through response. So I would encourage you, you're going to have to take some time to do this. Sudden traumatic loss protocol. What happens at the face of emergencies? Now, if you're a smaller team, you just sit and think about this authentically. I don't believe that you necessarily need an external person if you have a smaller team. You just want to make sure it's authentic and that you're clear about what your response will be and you share it with your team. So that could be a plan, that could be members of your team who are going to support that. My operations manager may step in and support certain matters. If I have fractional HR, they may support certain matters, and certainly leaders of function would need to have some responsibility. And then you may have to upskill your team. If this is new for folks, you may have to take some time, sit with them, coach them, train them, send them to programs or trainings that can give them some information. Whatever is necessary to make sure you're safeguarded is what I would encourage you to do. So here's an example, folks. 1 in 6 people globally are affected by infertility, World Health Organization. So I want you to consider a challenge. A longstanding team member discloses that they are battling infertility and are now exploring other options. They describe the impact this may have on them mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually. We sometimes shine the light on certain difficult experiences people go through. This doesn't always make the list, but it is one that many people are impacted by. And so how would we make sure that we're creating space for this reality? That is a moment or a season of a person's life. Certainly, we should be leaning into empathetic leadership. Amplification of the needs of our team. This is a prime example to educate our team on the unseen challenges that people are facing. We may offer this person flex work hours. We may lead them to employee assistance programs or benefit offerings. We may look at our policies and make sure that it is inclusive of the overarching needs of our people. That's what it means to look at the individual and to be able to consider what you can do as a leader, but also the support systems and resources you might create. If you're a smaller organization, maybe you can't do health insurance and policies yet or employee assistance programs, but you can be empathetic. You can communicate with your team and demystify. You can offer flexibility. You can check in. Okay, so that's an example of something to consider. Point number 2, I want you to infuse trust into your organizational DNA. What does that mean? You build a culture of trust. Does your company foster a culture of trust, honesty, and inclusion? Consider. Are policies and practices clear? What happens if someone breaches trust? Is it dealt with or not? How do we help people who manage and lead teams develop emotional intelligence as a way to build trust amongst each other, especially in virtual environments, if that's your eco? I want you to reflect on the outlets you've created to foster safety, psychological safety. Many of you have probably heard that term before in your work environment. What's working well? What's not? How do you allow people to share differing views without repercussion or without them feeling outed? You'll want to consider what that looks like for your organization as we're talking about this change and crisis environment that we are in. So here's an example. A humanitarian crisis hits close to home. One of the impacted countries is a major distribution center for one of your fast-growing products. More so, you know some of your employees have loved ones who live in the country, right? What would you do in this situation, folks? There's so many things you might consider. First, you'll want to address the situation at hand, maybe in a team huddle, immediate response. You'll want to set norms of the environment that you want to create as you bring your team together. Team, this is what we are here to do. This is not what we are here to do. So that there is a foundation of respect and understanding and civility at the offset of the conversation. You'll want to share what you know and what you don't know, and share that you'll follow up when you gather resources. You'll want to acknowledge the breadth of communities impacted. Don't pick sides. Yes, I know it. We all have our personal connections to certain matters, but you want to make sure if you are representing and you are serving a wide cast of people that you consider differing views. They do exist. This is where emotional intelligence becomes vital. You'll want to elevate support resources, consider philanthropic giving if it makes sense. And then you'll want to affirm your commitment to communication. As we go through this process, no matter how long it is, I will continue to check in. Our HR operations manager will be available for support. Make it clear what you commit to do. And when you stumble, because I have done it and we will all do it, acknowledge, move forward. Final few. Increase communication channels. Again, this makes every list, folks, but determine an authentic response. Clarify and repeat your messaging. Be open to questions. And then you'll want to consider tailoring your communication. What's org-wide, what's team-specific, what's individual. And my point for communication is don't guess how you think your team wants to be communicated to in the face of challenging times. Ask them, team, is this weekly or bi-monthly huddle working for us? Email or text? What's your preference and mode of communication, particularly if it's a personal matter? We'll want to ask because that's going to allow us to continue to build the trust muscle. There is not a one-size-fits-all when we're talking about people in this current environment, and this is what makes it challenging. And so as leaders of small team, we have to lean into that until we have the resources to bring other folks on board. If we're larger organizations, we have to build capacity in our leaders who oversee functions to be mindful of this. Okay, folks, we're getting to the end. In a recent all-hands meeting with your national team, one of your colleagues puts in the team's chat, should we be worried about layoffs given the recent downsizing by competitor X of 40% of their team? The team begins to chime in, question mark emojis in the chat. We've been thinking this, we've been thinking this. How do you handle a situation where you may feel put up against the wall by your team? They're questioning, they're wondering, you haven't said anything. They're seeing the news, their friends are sending them messages on LinkedIn and TikTok and Snapchat and every platform that exists. Take a step back and consider. For one, we would not avoid this. We should acknowledge, trust building measure, empathetically understand feelings. I know how you may be feeling. I apologize that we have not had a discussion on this yet. Your thoughts and feelings are warranted. I would be concerned too. You'll want to offer stability and guidance. Here's what I can promise at this moment, or here's what I can state at this moment. But team, I'm uncertain as well. We're navigating as best as we can. I need you to be adaptable. If you're on board for us to push forward for progress, here's what's going to be expected. And then you'll want to clarify, where is the org going? Does this mean that their jobs are at stake? If they are, yeah, we have to be cautious about our communications around this, but we should be saying, yeah, didn't land that contract. we didn't meet our KPIs and sales goals. Here's what it means. Here's what it doesn't mean, because people need to know, again, big vision, where we're going, and then how are they impacted as a part of our ecosystem. Final point, and this is really important and we don't do it enough. Reward, recognize, appreciate. Reward, recognize, appreciate, because during challenging times, all of us are trying to find footing, firm ground. Okay, we spend so much time at work. It is a place that significantly impacts people's well-being, whether we want to admit it or not. And so I want us to consider what we can do. Yes, we may not be in a position where everybody's getting a bonus or a raise. That's the truth. And if we've been communicating to our team along the way, shouldn't be a surprise. It should be something that they understand because you have been transparent along the way. But if you are in a position, you certainly want to consider what it means to reward strong performance. But at a minimum, we can recognize and amplify impact that's happening. Project impact, customer client impact, attitude, leadership, putting in those extra hours, helping support business development, all of that is helpful. It's our words, it's our written affirmations, it's the shout outs that happen as a team, it's the Slack channel responses. And then it's thinking about what incentives looks like for performance and starting to have that be a part of how you build trust and connection with your team. So I love this example as we prepare for Q&A of when we think about reward, recognition, appreciation, the differences. So again, rewards are above and beyond achievements. Could be bonuses, example, commission. Recognition is the spotlight. I say, like, put the light on the person, tied to behaviors and milestones. And remember, recognition could simply be cultural. The way you're leading, the way that you are listening, the way that you are supporting, all of that is fair game. And then finally, appreciation. And I will tell you all, I have a Post-it on my desk that I am always, every single day, trying to find ways to show gratitude and appreciation to my team. I probably do it too much. If you're on team, yes, just said that. But I believe in appreciation because it allows people, especially if we're being authentic, right? This is not that you're just saying it with no, intention behind it. But if it's truly warranted, you can never say it enough. Kind of like in a personal relationship, but that's for another session. So I do want you to consider for yourself, what are you doing to amp up appreciation and recognition for your team during challenging times? Again, rewards may be tough for a season, but consider non-tangible opportunities to show you care, because that is what people are looking for, vision and affirmation. Okay, folks, we are now time for Q&A, and I got us there. So this is wonderful. So before we get into it, and Desiree, please start to prepare for Q&A. For those of you who might have to hop a little bit early, I put together some resources. These are some amazing leadership books and resources, diverse set, I believe in that strongly, that could be beneficial if you're thinking about management and leadership. Pick and choose what you want, disregard what you don't. But these are really powerful that I would share, and you will see this in the recording and in the follow-up. And then for those of you who are here who are looking for fractional human capital solutions, or you are just interested in working with a partner to consider your people and culture, we are going to be working with a small group of small businesses, startup organizations on a fractional basis. So you can text ReImagine to 33777, and our team will connect with you on opportunities. Okay? So now we can prepare to get into Q&A, Desiree. So what do we have?
Well, first of all, Chelsea, thank you so much. I know that everyone on here got a lot out of today. And many of the questions we received were about communicating about national or global crisis. And I know that you touched on this, but can you reiterate for us the most important thing to remember when crisis happens?
Yes. And somebody is asking for the number real quick. So I'm going to put it in the chat.
Oh,
Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put this up for another minute while we talk, and then I will take it off. So here you go for the people who are asking. Desiree, one more time, what was your question? I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. So we've gotten several questions about the best way to communicate around national or global crises, and just asking you to reiterate the most important thing to remember when these events happen.
Yeah, and here's the reality. Every day, sadly, we are in an environment where something is happening across the globe every day. So the thing that you'll want to consider is this is where it's important to know your team. And the larger your org gets, the more hard it gets to know everybody's connection to what's happening. So you will have to sit and determine as a leader, I know it's hard. What are we going to respond to? What are we not going to respond to? I can't tell you what to do. I can just say whatever you're choosing to respond to, it should be connected to the ethos of your team, your people, your culture, your mission. Start there. Okay. And then you want to let your team know, team, if I've missed something that has impacted your life that's happening, open door policy. You come to me, you share with me, I want to understand, and we're going to hold space for it to the point appropriate to do so, right? So those are some things that you can definitely do. And the biggest thing that's going to be vital is humility, unequivocal humility. Because I will tell you, and I have been there, you will miss some things that impact certain people. It's just a part of the territory of leadership. But again, leadership is about how we respond. So if we get it wrong or a person is upset, how do we hold space for that emotion and feeling, acknowledge that it was something that we did not do intentionally, and consider where appropriate to move forward? Now, doing a full wide company response, you really have to own that and sit with that. I would not suggest you be bullied or pushed into doing that by a team member. But I do think, again, the most important thing is that you are holding space, hearing, listening, gathering questions and information, and then following up to make sure they feel supported. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Um, and so what are the best practices when not all team members are on board with constant changes? When you're trying to foster alignment, what would you recommend for a founder in that position?
That's so hard. Everybody's not going to always be on board. And we are at a time now, I mean, think about it. I'm not getting into all the things. Did you notice how I kept it pretty open? Because I'm not going to do that on this conversation. But what I'm going to say is there will likely always be someone who has strong disagreement on a stance. Do the best that you can do in a way that you feel authentic, you feel that you're being fully authentic and you're being as considerate as possible of the experiences of your people. But sometimes you just have to make a decision. That's why you're the founder and CEO. And that's the hard truth that other people want to tell you. Use this script. No, authenticity to who you are, what you believe, what you've built, who said yes to be a part of where you're going. Sometimes you're not going to make everybody happy and thrilled. But if that's your goal, you should not be a founder and CEO. Because it's hard. It comes with the territory. And I mean that from the most authentic place because I'm in the same boat that many of you are with these questions. Okay, so thank you for that.
Yes. And to move on, you've talked a lot about the world around us changing. And so to that end, AI is something that's on top of at the top of everyone's mind. And how are you seeing it actually impact the labor market? And if not, will it be? What advice do you have for business owners who have their eye on AI?
Well, first of all, get comfortable with it is one thing I would say. There's still so many founders, CEOs, and professionals who are not using AI. Start getting comfortable with it, even a couple of tasks a week. Your team, this is a big thing. We're going to be moving into the second half of the year. I'm going to really be encouraging every functional team member we have to use AI to work more efficiently. We might even do an AI challenge. And that AI challenge might be, I want you to consider an efficiency opportunity over the next 3 months using AI. Make it something that people are healthfully encouraged or pushed to do, because I think, again, that's going to get people's wheels turning. And again, what we need to be doing is supporting change and seeing change as an opportunity, not fearing change. Because if we fear it, we're not going to be able to sustain in the future. And that's the truth. So we want to get our people ready for a changing world of work.
That's wonderful. The emphasis on adapting rather than being afraid. Thank you. And so we have another question that's really about kind of working on and owning your vulnerability as a leader. So what advice do you have for a CEO who is experiencing, say, a family crisis? I mean, I know that we had the example of the worker, of the employee in your presentation, but how can a leader kind of work on communicating that to their teams?
A family crisis.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
Or health crisis, something similar,
or
something
a
that's
challenge.
personal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is the thing. You will have to ask the person, like, depending on what it is, it might be extremely personal.
Mhm.
It might be extremely personal. It may just be between you and the person. But I think the questions then become over time, does this start to impact other people on the team? In which case you will need to work with the person who's disclosed to you in a healthy way. What are we communicating, if anything? How is this impacting how you collaborate and how we drive towards business performance? Because that's the thing that's hard about this. Life happens for all of us, but we are still in a business. We're still in an organization. We still have a mission. And I think people understanding that our teams, that we are here because we have signed up to support this mission and grow this business or this enterprise, right? But at the same time, I care deeply for you as a part of our team that makes this happen. Both of them existing to the extent that they can is the goal, but it requires asking questions. It requires test trial, test trial opportunities. So with one of the people we've had on our team, they disclosed something to me, and I worked with them on a flexible work arrangement. And I said, we're going to test this. I trust you. You've earned it. We're going to test this. And if at the end of that, I'm noticing a negative impact to performance or business environment, we're going to have to talk about it. But we are piloting opportunities for people's real life experiences to coexist with their business impact. And that's ultimately what we can do as leaders.
Sure. And Chelsea, if you as the leader are experiencing these challenges, do the same things apply as
Oh,
far as
that's a good
supporting the
question. Like if
yeah.
you as a leader are going through,
Mhm.
back to my point, folks, trust. The sub bullet for this conversation should have been like building the muscle of trust, because how we lead through challenging times and crises, we are building trust. We're building the muscle of trust. So I would say we do have to model it. We have to have wisdom about what we share, folks. Like, I'm not telling you to be an open book, because I don't also think that's necessarily wise in this environment. But the more that we can share, and I'll give an example. I was meeting with the team member after being on the road for 2 weeks traveling. And she's like, she looked at me. We speak every day. And she's like, are you okay? And I wanted to, happy Chelsea, I'm doing great. I'm doing fine. It was the best 2 weeks ever. I feel amazing. And I just looked and I said, colleague, I'm tired today. I cannot wait to go rest, and I may take a personal day tomorrow. And I honestly can tell you all this. I noticed it. Her shoulders dropped, and I could notice the breath. And she's like, oh, me too. It's just been one of those weeks. And it was almost as though I was being shown in that moment, when we model and create space, we allow especially when there's power dynamic, we allow our colleagues to be able to do the same. And I'm noticing that is helping build trust. And I didn't used to do that, if I'm being very honest with this group, but I'm evolving in my leadership, and I would encourage you to as well.
That's great. And you know, going back to something that you said earlier about sharing your stance as a business, when you've stood on the decision that you thought was right for your company or your team, but you're facing backlash, how do you kind of correct the environment to get back to that place of stability and trust?
Mm. Acknowledge.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking about one organization we worked with, global company. Um, um, there was an acknowledgement to what was taking place globally, one particular situation. There was a company-wide acknowledgement. Employees did not feel that company-wide acknowledgement hit the mark. This individual, in another convening, apologized, took ownership, and said, I want to try this again. And mentioned, impacted parties in this particular scenario, impacted stakeholders in this scenario. And while, yeah, everybody might not have been walking out of there, with a big smile on their face, surely there was respect, because most leaders don't do that. And
Mm.
so I think it's that modeling that behavior. It's being willing to say, I was wrong. I might have missed this. I'm here for you, and I'm going to try at this again. And then the more that we can, again, stay close to our teams through this process, the better. So I really think that that's what's necessary. I think one thing I'll mention to you, some of you were probably coming thinking I was going to give you a formula or a framework for communication. This is Chelsea's opinion. There is not a framework or a model that is going to work for every single situation. So if that is around, I wouldn't trust it. This is an individual, emotionally intelligent, humility trait that we all have to build as leaders. I am in it with you. So folks, I hope that you found this to be beneficial. I'm rooting for your success. Take off the pressure, leaders, that we are going to be right and perfect every time. Get some healthy spaces to be able to process as well, because we as founders and CEO, we really hold on to a lot. We have a lot. We have our personal lives, we have our team, we have our business. It's a lot. So make sure you're filling your cup. I'm going to be filling my cup in a couple hours by going and getting in a long walk and then sitting down by the green and getting some fresh air. Do what you need to do to fill your cup up. And again, Tory Burch Foundation, I thank you so very much for the opportunity to serve this community. And folks, please stay in touch with me.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you so much. And I just before we sign off, I want to squeeze in this last question. If you
Yeah.
could give a few words on managing safety and healthier dynamics between customers and employees.
Yes, 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 yes. Customer dynamics between employees and customers. Oh, this is its own workshop. You want to ask me questions like this
Okay.
with minutes to spare, Desiree? Really? I'll try my best, folks. So this is where it gets tough, because some folks, I'm not saying anyone here, some folks are at the full mercy of their clients and customers. Maybe you've got some big customers and you can't afford to lose them, and they're doing all the things and saying all the things, and you're trying to keep, trying to keep them happy. And it's a very difficult balance. I've been there before, but I would just strongly suggest that you be in the best interest of your team, and you do the best that you can to support that, to ensure that they feel supported, seen, heard. If there is bad behavior, toxic behavior that is seen in customers and clients, the conversation needs to happen, folks. Don't sweep it under the rug just because there are, and I get it, I have been there. Some of these checks are big. I know, I said it, but it's not worth it, because the trust parameter goes down for the team if you don't confront the situation. And then you are allowing that toxicity and that behavior to permeate on your team. And so I do think you might even consider with your customers and clients, here's our ways of working. If they're service-based businesses, here's our norms of how we work and how we, our values of partnership and engagement. I know for product-based businesses, it may be challenging, but certainly your values and your eco are important. So folks, it seems like this has been helpful. I
Yeah.
hope that this was worth your time.
It has. Thank you for those final words.